we did not finish up with lesson number 10. And so we're going to take a look at the last part of lesson number 10, and then we're going to dive into lesson number 11. And Lord willing, we're going to get through lesson number 11. So we'll just have to see about that. But lesson 11 is on page number, or lesson 10, excuse me, page number 34 of where we are at tonight. And we're also in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. And Twix, what do you want down there? Well, do you want to go out? Come on, let's go out. Hold on a second. Come on. There you go. If that isn't the first instance of you witnessing a dog interrupting a Bible study, that is the first instance that I can remember of a dog interrupting one of my Bible studies, okay? At least we weren't talking about something real serious. That's why I decided to just go ahead and let her go on out. Okay, so we're going to be right at the end of chapter 10, right at verse number 20. Tonight, which is at the top of page number 34. And it says, "Do not revile the king, even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird of the air may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say." Okay? All right, so taking a look at our lesson material right here. Reading Proverbs chapter 10 and verse number 20, is this something that is figurative or literal? And what point is it then making? Are there time? Oh, wait a minute. Did we read? Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Is this figurative or literal? What point is it then making? Are there times that our bitterness or anger comes out unexpectedly? Why? What would be a good way to prevent this? And so to kind of speed things up, we're going to just kind of look at something just kind of simply. And the question that I want you to be thinking about and answering, and put it in the comments box if you have an answer, would have been that last little one of what would be a good way to prevent this. Now, let's take a look at this, this proverb and kind of dive into it and see a little bit about what it's saying here. There in verse number 20 about do not revile the king even in your thoughts or curse the rich in your bedroom. You got to remember that, you know, this is in a different time, a different place, different culture than what ours is today. And so the people that would have had power would have been the people who would have been rich, and the king, that would have been the royalty. And so when he says there about don't revile the king even in your thoughts or curse the rich even in your bedroom, you got to just, I think that one thing that we can look at it is just simply, you better watch out as far as what you say and what you think about people who are in positions of authority that are over you. And I think that there are a lot of different times that, something may be kind of bubbling up inside of us, and we don't really stop to think about what is going to just unexpectedly come out of our mouths because of this. And so if you revile somebody in a position of authority, whether it's in your thoughts or whether it's in your actions, you better really watch out about that, right? I think that a lot of the times, we do something and we say something. Maybe it's a case where, you're at work and you're just talking with a coworker about, a boss or a supervisor or an owner or something like that. You never know who else might be listening to that, right? And it's almost like a little birdie in the air. It's just, taking your words and taking them to the people in charge. And then the next thing you know, you're in hot water, not necessarily because of what you're saying to the person, but because of what you're saying about the person to somebody else, that somebody else could have gone and taken it and reported it. Okay? So, what would be a good way to kind of prevent these things? Anybody have any ideas, any comments, anything that I'm seeing in the comment section? One thing that I've thought of, as far as living in today's time, is that I think that we have to be really careful. We've got to really watch out about what we put online and on social media. I know that that's probably a broken record to a lot of people, but I think that that is, something that we really have to watch out for, and we got to be mindful of it. I think that a lot of the times when we're online, we think that we have, anonymity, and that, what we're saying, we're not really saying to people, and that what we're saying, we're just kind of faceless people in the crowd, and, it's not going to really get back to us. When in all actuality, that's not the case. Some of the things that we say, what we post online can really cause problems for us. And it's almost like, those little birds, those little tweeting birds can really get you. And so, all right, let's see what we've got here. We've got a couple of comments of Paula. Oh, hi, Paula. How are you? And Paula, God bless you today. Paula says, bridle your tongue. So much easier said than done sometimes. Yeah, you've got that absolutely right. We do need to be sure that we bridle our tongues. And, James talks about that, how that, a little bitty rudder can steer a ship, a little bridle can steer a big animal, a horse. But, our tongues are little bitty things, but a lot of times our tongues can really get us into trouble. And it's hard. It's really hard to, control about what we say, but we absolutely do.
Carol commented about Paula.
Okay. Carol says, pray for those people. Oh, okay. Yeah. Carol, I saw the word prayer, but I was thinking, that it was, attached to prayer request. But no, you're right. One good thing to do, when, and this kind of gets over the negative feelings about things, when you have negativity and bitterness and anger built up, it's easy to let things slip. But if you stop and if you pray for people in positions of authority, then that can be something that can, adjust your emotions towards that person. And Paul, or what kind of material we portray in videos on YouTube? Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we're portraying the right kind of videos on YouTube with our YouTube channel, right? And Marianne says, change your heart. And I think that that's the key right there, is that we really have to have a change of heart. And it all starts with awareness, right? And so one thing about this proverb is to give us a warning of, hey, we need to change our what's going on in our heart and everything, so that we don't have those kinds of problems. Okay? All right. Any more comments there? Oh yeah, we've got a lot of comments, which is really great. Okay, so moving on to the next proverb, which is in chapter 11 and verse number 1. Okay, so this is a little bit of a different scenario, or a different kind of thing here. Okay, we're going to talk about this in chapter 11 and verse number 1. It says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again." Okay? And so when you think about that phrase, cast your bread upon the waters, what in the world does that really mean? With this, I want you to think about that next question. This is the question that we're really going to be focusing on answers about, and that is, how much reward should we expect if we never take any risks? Okay, so now going back to that first part about casting your bread on the waters, what does that mean? I think what that means, and if you've got a difference of opinion about it, that's fine. But I think about this, cast your bread upon the waters, is it's kind of like, you have the water there, and if you're thinking about it in terms of taking your bread and just throwing it on the water, that's really not going to do any good, right? I mean, you're just taking your bread and you throw it there, and you're not going to, after many days, find it again. And if you do find it, I don't know if you're going to want it again. I think this phrase about cast your bread upon the waters is really to take like somebody who is got a shipment of grain or something like that, and they're going to be putting it on ships and shipping it off. Okay, and so there is a little bit of a risk side to that. If you take some of your grain and you put it there on the ship and it goes off, then there is a chance that it's going to sink and you're going to lose your money, or you're going to lose your cargo, things like that. But at the same time, the more that you attempt in that endeavor, then after many days, you should start to find it again. You should start to have a return. Let's see, Olga, you said, what you sow, you will reap. That is true, and certainly that is part of the Bible. I don't know if I necessarily see it there as far as casting our bread on the water. But again, like I said, the way I interpret it is that it's like taking and putting something on a ship, like, and then after many days you're going to see it, or what? Or like an investment. Yeah, like investment. And there's the idea, and that's the question that we're driving at here, and that is, how much reward should we expect if we never take any risks? Hang on a second. Let me, whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Really meant to do this and that, and then this right there. How much reward should we expect if we never take any risks? So what do you got? You got any comments to put in the box there? While you're putting your comments in there, does this verse guarantee success in things? And no, it really does not. As a matter of fact, when you look at Proverbs, one thing that I read many years ago that made a lot of sense to me, and that is that Proverbs oftentimes talks about principles instead of promises. And so many times when you look in the book of Proverbs, or you look in the book of Ecclesiastes, and you read something and it sounds like it's a promise, you think, oh, this is going to happen. It's guaranteed to happen if I do this. And that's really not the case. What's more the case is it's just setting forth the principle here, okay? And so there is no guarantee for success. In fact, when you go and you take a look at the book of James chapter 4, you shouldn't say, we will go to this or that city. We will spend a year there. We will buy and sell. We will make a profit. No, you have no guarantees of that. Your life is just like a vapor. Instead, what you should say is, if the Lord wills, we'll go to this or that city and spend a year there and make a profit. Okay? All right. Getting back to this idea about, risk and reward. If we never take any risks, if we never step out and try to attempt anything, then we're never going to accomplish anything, right? I mean, when you think about risk and reward, if we're going to do something, we've got to step out. There is an inherent side of risk in life. If you want to live life with no risk, then you're not really living life. You're just, like what we've been doing for the last month or so, just being confined in our house, and that's that. That's really not doing anything, and it's not really going to be advancing anything or gaining anything. And so, you've got to assume that there's going to be a little bit of risk for everything that we do. At the same time, you got to measure things, and that was the other Proverbs that we looked at in chapter 10 about, sitting back and saying, if there is enough of a risk there, then maybe it's not worth it. Maybe we don't need to do it. All right, so Paul says, we take a risk of being turned down, being judged, or getting retaliated against by spreading God's word. And absolutely, you are right, Paul. That's taking it in a spiritual direction there, which is good. We need to realize that we are kind of putting ourselves out there when we are trying to live a Christian life. And we need to assume that when, we do have negative reactions for people, we shouldn't think that we're doing things wrong. As a matter of fact, the disciples took their persecution as a sign that they're doing things right, that they were living godly lives, and the same people that persecuted Jesus were persecuting them. And so when we go and live lives and we, start to try to advance God's kingdom, there are some risks that are there. Okay? All right. Moving on. Taking a look at the next question. In verse number 2, Do you think there's a correlation between being generous and people being generous back to you? Why is this important in our life of uncertainty? So taking a look at chapter 11 and verse number 2, it says, "Give portions to 7, yes to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land." Okay, so what we're going to focus on here is this right here. Why is this important in our life of uncertainty? And today we do have a whole lot of life of uncertainty. And so why is this important? Well, what it's talking about here in verse number 2 is give portions to 7, yes to 8. So a lot of times when you read this in Proverbs, and we haven't really seen much of that in Ecclesiastes, but it's just simply a way of saying, 3 and 4, or 6 and 7, or in this case 7 and 8. It's an amplification of it. And so we need to give portions to 7, yes to 8. And so, if 7 is good enough, 8 is even better. And so as far as giving portions go, really that's talking about being generous. And so we do need to be generous people, right? And we need to, really have a reputation of being generous. And if we have a reputation of being generous, then it might go well for us when we have times of uncertainty. And so what do you think? Why is this important in our life of uncertainty?
I mean, today's events could factor into this, how you act and how you've been doing things before COVID-19, and maybe, you are being generous before, but then disaster comes upon us like right now, maybe even job loss or something, but God's going to take care of you for being generous and being faithful to Him.
Yeah. I mean, there is the side that if we are generous, then, God is going to take care of us because we're doing what we should. Another thing that I've looked at, and Shannon, you brought up in this day and time, if you may have known somebody, maybe there's somebody who was not very generous. They're very stingy. They're very selfish. They're very, very cynical. And then all of a sudden when trouble hits, and trouble hits them, people are not going to be as likely to help them out. If they refuse to help people out for many, many years and they had a reputation of being a stingy person, then all of a sudden when trouble comes upon them, people are going to be less likely to go and to help them back. On the other hand, you got somebody who's going to be has a reputation of being generous. Then when trouble strikes them, then people are going to be more likely to go and to return the favor and to help them back. I mean, that's human nature. You want to be nice to the people who have been nice to you, and so on and so forth. Okay? All right. Let me see. So moving on, let's take a look at the next little bit. Now, the next passage of scripture that we've got here is really linked. You know what I've been saying, that a lot of times we have proverbs that are just simply independent, one right after another. And so the last three that we've looked at, that's true. Chapter 10 and verse number 20 really doesn't have anything to do with chapter 11 verse 1. 11 verse 1 doesn't have anything to do with chapter 11 verse 2. But now we run into a section where all of these verses are linked together, okay? And so we need to take a look at chapter 3 verses, or chapter 11 verses 3 through 6. And you know what? I just happened to have it right here for us, okay? Here we go. Okay. If you can see that, if you can't, apologize for that. Okay. So this is the Holman Christian Standard translation that I've got up here. But if you notice, it says this: if the clouds are full, they will pour out rain on the earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or the north, the place where a tree falls, there it will lie. One who watches the wind will not sow.
It's just rain.
Is it windy out there?
It's raining.
Shan's saying it's just raining, so I can't watch it
Oh,
then.
you need to focus.
Okay. Huh?
Focus.
This was a joke. Okay, so chapter 11, verse 4. One who watches the wind will not sow, and the one who looks at the clouds will not reap. Just as you don't know the path of the wind, or how bones develop in the womb of a pregnant woman, so you don't know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening do not let your hand rest, because you don't know which will succeed, whether one or the other, or if both of them will be equally good. Okay? All right, so moving back over here to our questions. It says, read chapter 3, verse 6, through verse 6. They're linked together as a group. What does verse 3 mean? How does this relate to the end of verse 5? Okay? And then the question that we're going to focus on is this. Do you see sometimes things will happen in life that are beyond your control but not beyond God's? Okay, so let's take a look at verse number 3 and see how it relates to the end of verse number 5. So in verse number 3 here, about the clouds are full, they'll pour out rain on the earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. Okay, and so what I see from this proverb is just simply there's going to be processes on this earth that take place that we really don't have any control over whatsoever. I mean, you know, if you think about it, if the clouds are full, they'll pour rain on the earth. Okay, whether it's a good time for rain, whether it's a bad time for rain, whether you are having an outdoor wedding or planning on having an outdoor wedding, like we were trying to have this this past weekend. It's just that it's just a fact of life. It's one of those things when the clouds become saturated and develop, they're going to pour forth rain on the earth. That's just the way that it is. And then whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, where it falls, that's just simply where it's going to be. That's where it's going to lie. If you think about a tree falling, it's like, the tree falls over to the north and falls on your fence. You're kind of like, man, I really wish that tree wouldn't have done that. I wish the tree would have fell the other way. Well, it doesn't matter what you think. Where a tree is going to fall, it's going to fall. And where it falls, that's where it's going to lie. Okay? So we take a look at that and we compare that to this right here. And that is, so you don't know the work of God who makes everything. Okay? You see, there are processes that God has on this earth. And these processes that Paul has, these things are going to take place. The processes of a virus becoming a pandemic. That's just simply an occurrence, a process of a tornado happening, a process of just any number of things. It's just it happens. And so we look at stuff like that. We think, what's going on? What is the work of God? Well, God is in charge, but even though He's in charge, He has these processes going on, and these processes are going to be affecting different people differently. And when it happens, there's going to be sometimes that it falls here, and sometimes it falls there. Okay. All right, so going back to our question, and that is this. Do you see that sometimes things will happen in life that are beyond our control, but not beyond God's? Okay? Hello, Crystal. Glad that you are here with us. Anybody got any comments that you want to put in the comment box? Any answers to that question? I guess, it's kind of self-explanatory there. And maybe you just don't need to have any questions on it, okay? Well, if you do, put it in there and we'll come back to it. But we're going to continue on. We're going to compare verse number 4 with the first part of verse number 5, okay? All right. Taking a look at the first part of verse number 4. It says, the one who watches the wind will not sow, and the one who looks at the clouds will not reap. just as you don't know the path of the wind or how the bones develop in the womb of a pregnant woman. So you think about, the wind that's happening outside. Of course, we know that, it's a storm front that's coming in, and we know that there's downdrafts from the thunderstorms, and, we know all those things. But as far as, the path and the direction of God, we don't really know all of those things. And so there, verse number 4 is, the one who watches the wind will not sow, and the one who looks at the clouds will not reap. Somebody who was sowing in those days and times would, go out there and just take a handful of seed and just scatter it and scatter it and scatter it. If somebody is constantly waiting for the opportune time to go out there where there's absolutely no wind, where you can just throw your seed and not lose any, you're probably not going to find a time for it. Now, obviously, there's going to be times where it's just like, hey, it's really windy, we need to wait till a later time. But more often than not, you just have to, go with it and not deal with it. And the same way about the one who looks at the clouds will not reap. It's kind of like, it's looking like it's going to rain out there. Well, we better not get out there and start to reap, because it's going to start to, rain. So let's just leave it for, well, it looks like another, it's just, sometimes you just got to jump in there. Okay. All right. Comment says, don't let what you don't know disturb what you do know. Hey, Gary, I like that comment. I've actually heard that comment spoken before, is don't let what you don't know confuse what you do know. But this is good too. Don't let what you don't know disturb what you do know. And Paul, yep, it's a good thought. Okay, all right. So going back and taking a look at our questions here. Okay, obviously that comment was about the question before. It looks like we've got something else. Gary, that reminds me of God's great plan for earth. Things are scary in life, but since we know Jesus is our Savior, we shouldn't worry. Hey, Paul, we're going to get to that in just a minute. You're skipping ahead of us. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so looking at this question right here. Is this saying that we shouldn't use forethought and planning in what we're doing? What do you think? If we're, just kind of out there, should we just, run with it, charge in there very recklessly, or should we have some sort of forethought in planning in what we're doing? What do you think? It's saying, if you watch the wind, you're not going to sow. If you watch the clouds, you're not going to reap, right? So, what do you think? Oh, this darn delay on Facebook. It just, takes 20 seconds or so there. You're probably putting in comments there that saying, yeah, you got to have forethought and things. And you really do. I mean, and really that's part of wisdom, is to use forethought and to use planning in what you do. But at the same time, kind of going back to that proverb about cast your bread on the water, sometimes we've got to understand that there's a little bit of risk in there as well. And we've just got to take that risk along with things as we go. Okay? All right, if you've got a question or put a comment in the box, I'm going to come back to it in just a second. Okay, here we go. If there is no planning, then there is no good, there is no growing God's kingdom. Yeah, Paul, I think that we do need to plan about things and, pray. And when you're talking about God's kingdom, certainly need to pray about things and pray for God to help us in our understanding. Okay. All right. So going on and taking a look at the next one, that is looking at verse number 6. Why should a person be busy at both times a day? Can you think of a modern saying that will reflect it? There's the question right there that I want us to think of. And let's go and take a look at verse number 6. Okay. So in verse number 6, it says, in the morning, sow your seed, and in the evening, do not let your hand rest, because you don't know which will succeed, whether one or the other, or if both of them will be equally good. And so if you think, back to the analogy of the farmer, in the morning, you go out there and you sow your seed. But in the evening, you don't let your hand be idle. What you're doing then is you're working on something else. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to sow my seed, but what happens if the wind carried off my seed? What happens if those plans are destroyed? Well, if you're working on something else, then it's maybe this is going to have an effect. Maybe it's going to succeed. You notice there it says, because you don't know which will succeed, whether it's this or that one. Maybe it's the one of sowing the seed in the morning. Maybe it's the other of going and doing what you're doing in the evening. Or it could be that both of them will be equally good, right? But the thing is, you've worked about things, you planned about things, you're being diligent about things. And if neither of them, succeeds, you're just going to have to say, well, okay, God's going to take care of me. But God can take care of the others too.
So my comment is verse 6 makes me feel lazy.
Verse 6 makes us feel lazy.
Does that mean we have to never sit down and not do anything?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think it just means that you can't legitimately be lazy. I mean, we got up this morning, we did our work, and we're doing some other things tonight. You really do. Now, if you get up in the morning and then you go back to bed, and then you get up a little bit later on and you eat lunch, and then it's time for an afternoon nap, and then it's too late in the day to really start some things, so we're just going to play around, and then have dinner and watch some TV before bedtime. You kind of got to understand you're not going to go anywhere. What's that?
That's Saturday.
Yeah, that's Saturday. That's a snow day. That's a snow day.
You don't get those anymore.
We don't get snow days in May, even though it's not quite May yet. Boy, it doesn't feel like we're going to have a snow day for a while. Okay. All right. Let's move on, shall we? Let's go on and take a look at our next little bit. Taking a look at lesson number 11, shall we? Lesson number 11, okay, which is still in chapter 11 here, okay. So, in taking a look at lesson number 11, which is in chapter 11, verse number 7, going on into chapter 12 in verse number 8, this is where he kind of wraps some things up, okay? Now, if you remember thinking all the way back to chapter 1, it starts out with a little bit of a prologue of the words of the teacher, and then the teacher starts to speak, okay? And so now the teacher, Solomon, has gone and he has given his speech, and all of this that we have been reading is more or less a speech that's been going on. And so now he's going to kind of come to the very last little bit of it, and the speech itself is going to be wrapped up in chapter 12 in verse number 8. But then we've got another little section, that's going to be lesson number 12, where there's going to be like a little prologue that that goes on after that, okay? So there's something before and then something after. I can't remember what the prologue and the, I guess, post-log is. Anyway, pro is before, post is after. So there's going to be an epilogue afterwards. Okay, so taking a look at this and this wrapping things up, we need to kind of remember about what we're talking about here. Now, in the book of Ecclesiastes, you remember that there were several different conclusions that Solomon had talked about. Okay, so as far as the conclusion goes, the first conclusion that he talked about was this: meaningless. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And so when we're talking about life under the sun, life under the sun, everything is meaningless. When you look at human life without any kind of respect or any kind of dealing with God, when you think about it, it really is meaningless, because everything is going to come to an end with our death, okay? And so that was the very first conclusion that he came to. But at the same time, he came to another conclusion, and that conclusion is just simply this: enjoy life. All right? That is, since life has so many dark moments to it, when you find a bright moment to it, you need to enjoy life. Now, there is going to be another conclusion that he comes to, and that conclusion is this: fear God. I guess I should have made that a 3 right there. Okay? Number 3 is fear God. That is the final conclusion that he's done. And so if you stop and think about, what's going on here, is look at life under the sun. First of all, it's meaningless, right? It's pointless. The totality of it is that way. And so what can you do about life under the sun? Well, if you find some things to enjoy, you better enjoy them, right? But at the same time, there is more to this life than life under the sun. And so now we've got this idea about fearing God. Okay? All right. So, looking at this and taking a look at chapter 11, verse number 7 and 8, we kind of see a little bit of a basis of this. So in chapter 11, in verse number 7 and 8, it says this: light is sweet, and it pleases the eye to see the sun. However many years a man may live, let him enjoy them all. But let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. Nothing will come, everything to come is meaningless. Okay, so we've got a couple of different concepts here. We've got there in verse number 7, light. And then if we continue on down in verse number 8, we see the days of darkness. We've got light and darkness. Now, speaking metaphorically, we look at this and we see that this idea about light is sweet and pleases the eye and the sun is really talking about, the good things in life. And you think about in verse number 8 there about remember the days of darkness, for there will be many, is really just simply talking about the bad times in our life. And so we've got this combination of good times and we've got combination of bad times. We've got days of darkness. We've got times where it's sadness, it's grief. We've got times that it's trouble and anger and angst and everything like that. But at the same time, we've got those moments of the good times. And so the moments when life is good, that those good times, those things are sweet, and those are the things that we need to look at. And it pleases the eye under the sun. But at the same time, he goes to say that we need to, however years a man may live, he needs to enjoy them. But he needs to remember the days of darkness, because there's going to be many. And if you think about it, you cannot have a life full of sunshine and rainbows. I mean, there are going to be times where it's dark. And, as the life that we're living on this under the sun, that's just simply going to be the way that those things are going to be. Okay? All right, let's go and take a look at some questions here, discussion questions. Are there times in life you have waited for things to get better in the future only to look back and see that things were better in the past?
Raising kids.
Okay.
When they were babies, we couldn't wait till they grew up, and then when they grew up, they had problems, harder problems to deal with.
That's the empty nest mother over there talking, which is actually that is the same thing that I thought of as I looked at this today. I was thinking, what kind of illustration am I going to use for this? And the illustration that I decided to use for this was like, kids, man, when you got, especially young kids, it's just like, wow, when are they going to grow up? When are they going to grow up? And now that my kids have grown up, and the youngest daughter got married this past weekend, it's kind of like, wait a minute, where did it go? And so, I think it's really an easy trap to fall into, always thinking that there's something better around the corners, and then all of a sudden we finally get around enough corners that we look back and we think, hey, I've just missed out on a whole lot of very good opportunities. Okay, anybody else? Paul says, I have more sleep before kids, but the precious moments with them are priceless. Very good. Very good. All right. Next question. And that is, instead of looking ahead to better times, could remembering back to bad times make you feel better about the present? I was also more financially free, no doubt about that. Man, kids are expensive. Okay. What about that as far as looking ahead to better times? Could you just kind of remember back to the bad times, make you feel better about the present? Do you think that that might be a little bit of a I guess bit of advice to follow there? You know, here you are, you're always looking for something better, always looking for something better and not finding it.
You can always say things could be worse.
Things could be worse, yeah, you know, and, they say that, we say oftentimes that, when you're going through some bad time, that if you look around and you think, you see somebody who's got something worse, it makes you think, well, you know what, maybe I just don't have it so bad. Paul says, yes, I don't want to mention times God got me out of situations I got myself into. You know, there's sometimes that, we're in a current situation now, and we feel like we're struggling, and we feel like, things maybe aren't quite going well very spiritually. But maybe we can look back on the times when we weren't in God's fellowship, and maybe even times when we weren't even a Christian. And then we can think, even though I may not be perfect now, at least I'm not doing back, the same things that I was back then. Okay? All right. Moving on. Let's see. How much time do we have? We've got a few more minutes. I think we can kind of get into this next little part here. In the next couple of verses, Solomon starts to give us a little bit of advice about all of this, okay? So he's got that basis there, just kind of reminds us a little bit about what life is all about. And then in verse 9 and verse number 10, it says this. It says, be happy, young man, while you are still young. Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see. But know for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. So then, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless. And so, the little advice that he's beginning to lead out here with is just simply, young man, and keep in mind, Solomon is addressing people who are young, okay? And so, young man, while you're young, enjoy your life, okay? Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see. And so, it seems like when you are young, you have a little bit more zip in your step, and you have more ambition, and you don't and aren't as, I guess, I don't want to use the word jaded, but maybe just kind of cautious a little bit with the things of life. And so, when people are young, they do have a little bit more freedom attached to them. They have more freedom as far as maybe they don't have as many roots tying them down, and they're able to do a whole lot of different things. And so, he's just saying, young men, while you're young, do these things. If your heart is giving you joy, then let your heart give you joy. If you've got the ways of your heart, if you've got dreams, if you've got goals and ambitions, it's the time to do those things is pretty much when you're young, right? And so he says, but then he gives this last little advice, but know for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. And so because we've got, this idea about our hearts and doing the things of our hearts, it doesn't give us a blank check to go out and do whatever we want. We've got to think, okay, yeah, I want to do this. My heart is leading me to do this, but we got to step back and say, but is this God's will? Is this what God wants? Is this something that is going to displease God or not? And if it's something that's going to displease God, then we need to take a step back, because we understand that Even though we are being told here to follow the ways of our heart, it does not mean our sinful ways, because God is going to bring us into judgment for all these things. But take a look at verse number 10, okay? So then, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless. You know, the youth and the vitality of youth, those things are meaningless because they're not going to last. And so one thing that we need to do is just simply banish our anxiety from our heart and the troubles of our body, and just simply live life and do the things that we're going to do. At the same time, remembering that in living life, we need to live life for God and not for ourselves. Okay? All right. Moving on to some discussion questions here. Okay? How do you view worry? Now, this is something that, let's have fun with this here. Everybody can put in a one-word answer here, and that is, if you could imagine worry to be an animal, what animal would it be? Okay? So while you're thinking about that, I'm going to read you some worry animals that I've got written down here. Okay? And these worry animals that I got written down, I don't know if I read them before and wrote them down, or if I thought them up. I don't know. If I thought them up, I must be doing some pretty clever stuff. I think I read them and wrote them down. Okay, but here's some worry animals and why these worry animals are there. Okay, and that is an elephant. Marianne, I guess that's going to go with your mouse. A meerkat. Okay, Carol, you've got to give me the reason for the meerkat. Okay, a skunk. Okay, now I can see a skunk. But getting back to an elephant, because an elephant never forgets. Okay, and so worry. It's like that worry. It's never forgetting. It's there. Here's something else. A duck. Okay, because it goes under only to pop up later on. That's the way a lot of times worry is. It goes under and we get rid of it, and then it pops back up. A groundhog. Why a groundhog? Okay,
Carol.
he keeps popping up. Oh, okay,
A meerkat.
All right. Okay. Here's another one, and that is a monster. Always scary, but always imaginary. So we're thinking about Sully under the bed. Okay, a monster under the bed is always going to be scary, but it's always going to be imaginary. A lot of times that's the way our worries are. Is that it is there? They're always very fearful, but at the same time, a lot of the things that we worry about. They don't really come to pass. It seems like the really bad stuff that happens in life just catches you out of left field. Rarely is one thing that you're going to worry about always going to be the one to get you. Okay, here's my last one. Okay, and that is a tiger cub. All right, a tiger cub. It's something we want to cuddle, but eventually it's going to grow up and kill us. Okay, so I think a lot of times worry is something that we want to cuddle, we want to hang on to it, because there's just some people that they just want to worry about something. Their life is incomplete unless they're worrying about something. But at the same time, when you're worrying and worrying and worrying and worrying, eventually it's going to grow up and eventually it's going to get you. Okay, so all right.
We got Paul. Olga with snake and grizzly bear.
A snake and a grizzly bear. Paul with a chicken. Okay. Bok, bok, bok. And okay. And Connie, it pops back up like a lion. All right. Okay. Here's another one, and that is a monster, always scary but always imaginary. We're always who knows what you're thinking about. Okay. All right.
And then Vicky.
Vicky, okay, here we got to go on. We got to look at the next question, okay? So the next question is read Matthew chapter 6, verse 27, and we've got another one of Matthew chapter 6, verses 31 and 32, okay? And of course, You're absolutely right, because Brother Philip's always right. Right? Got to say that.
That worry
Okay.
is a lack of faith.
And that worry is lack of faith. And actually, that is right. We're going to look at that in here in the book of Matthew. Okay? So, in Matthew chapter 6, let's see. Getting on over here. All right. So, in Matthew chapter 6 and in verse number 27, it says this. Hold on a second. Here we go. Okay, now maybe I can see those little numbers a whole lot better. Oh, there's verse 27. Okay. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life, or a single cubit, or a single 18 inches to your height? Okay. Can worry do anything for us? Well, the answer is obvious. No, right? Worry's not going to do anything. The worry is not going to do anything to solve a problem. Worry is just going to create more problems later on. Okay, so Jesus in verse 27, who can, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Nobody can. Worry's not going to do anything productive. And then in verse 31, it says this. It says, so do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. Okay? And so, does worry reflect a Christian outlook or a non-Christian outlook? Paul Carver says that worry raises blood pressure. Yeah, it doesn't do any good. You know, if you think about it, worry is really something that is going to be reflective of a non-Christian character, because a Christian character should be reflective of faith, right? And when we look at life, and when we look at some of the things that we've been talking about in the book of Ecclesiastes, yeah, there's things that we can control and there's things that we can do. At the same time, we need to understand that there's some things in life that we can't control and some things in life that we can't do. But as far as God goes, when we're living life under the S-O-N instead of the S-U-N, then we step out of that perspective of everything is meaningless, and we start to look and say, well, you know what? Even though I don't understand what's going on with this now, and even though as far as what this is, it's meaningless, God has a different reason and God has a different plan. And so I'm not going to worry about these things. I'm going to, going back to what we were talking about in the book of Ecclesiastes, going to banish and cast anxiety off of my life. And I'm going to just simply go and I'm going to live life. I'm going to live life for God, and I'm going to do what God wants. And if you think about it, when we start to do that, then we really do start to show that we have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, and that relationship is anchored on faith. When we're constantly worried about things, and we're constantly afraid of things, we're constantly depressed about things because of worry, then really what we're showing is that we're not showing that we're willing to commit things to God who is in control. Okay? All right, we're going to stop right there, and we're going to pick up with lesson number 11. We're going to finish lesson number 11 off next week, and hopefully finish off lesson number 12 as well. We're kind of coming down to the end of things. I think lesson number 12 should go pretty quickly, and so I think we can probably get both things in. Anyway, thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate you being with us. And if you have any questions about, tonight's lesson, maybe you're watching this on the replay broadcast, not live broadcast, and you've got different questions about things. If you want to just message me or, go to our website, friendsandfaith.net. If you go to that website, friendsandfaith.net, and go down to the bottom, there is a contact box, and if you want to fill that out, then that will shoot me an email, and you can get a hold of me that way as well. But anyway, appreciate you being with us tonight, And join us next week, and we'll continue with the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay? All right. Well, God bless.